Not all of Jesus' parables are as accessible as others. I don't keep sheep. I don't plant seeds in a field and grow grain. But there is one of the short parables that Jesus told that I've become more familiar with than the others. In Luke chapter 13, Jesus told this short little story about a woman. He said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a woman who took a yeast and mixed it into a large amount of flour until the yeast went all through the flour." This is my yeast. The leaven is another word for it, and I'm going to mix it into a large amount of flour. The yeast is the messy part. So I've just measured out 10 kilograms of flour. I like to mix my dough by weight, and put about a little less than 1 kilo of whole wheat flour and 4 and a little bit of kilos of white flour together with my water and my yeast, and I'm about to mix the dough. I like to mix my dough by hand. It helps me to know if I've got the balance of water and flour right. My dad's mom, I know, made bread like this almost every day. And she brought her yeast, her sourdough yeast, her culture of yeast from Germany when they came to Canada. A little detail in the parable that Jesus told that sometimes gets overlooked is that he mentions the amount of dough that this woman makes. The kingdom of heaven is like a woman who took yeast and mixed it into a large amount of dough. That's what the NIV text says, just a large amount. Other translations say maybe mixed it into 2 measures or 3 measures of dough. The units of measurement were different than we use today, the units that they used back then. But the amount of dough is actually specified, and it turns out that it's the same amount of dough as Sarah, Abraham's wife, used way back in the book of Genesis. In that text, it's Genesis 18, it says that Sarah used 3 seahs of flour, and that translates into modern units as about 22 liters of flour. What's the meaning of this parable? The yeast mixed into the dough. God's people mixed into the world. The kingdom of heaven, Jesus said, is like yeast mixed into the dough. He's talking about his people, his followers, people like you and me, mixed into the dough of the world. The yeast has real power. It raises the bread. It brings life to the bread. You also bring life to the world as Jesus puts his life in you, and you permeate into the areas of your life that you meet with the people that you know, you work with the people that you work with, you travel out into society, you bring life into the world. And Jesus' life is in you. During this season of Easter life, I pray that your yeastiness would be noticed by your neighbors, by your family, by the people that you can have contact with, even as increasingly we get back to seeing each other and talking with each other through the summer. May you be a rich, life-giving, beautiful yeast. Well, about an hour has passed, and now I'm adding the last ingredients to the dough. Some salt and a little bit of extra water to dissolve the salt. A couple things have struck me from this parable. First, this great quantity of flour that the woman mixed together in Jesus' parable. 22 liters of flour, a huge amount of dough. Why was she making so much bread? I like to think that maybe there was some big public feast that was happening. Maybe it was a wedding, it could have been a funeral, or maybe this woman was just making a giant party at her household and inviting all of her neighbors and making enough bread so that everyone in town could come and have something to eat. I'm going to let this bread rise for a few hours today, actually until about 3 or 4 this afternoon, most of the day. And by that time, the yeast will have aerated the dough and turned something pretty boring, just flour and water, into something exciting. Bread dough ready to bake. and what's more exciting than fresh baked bread? The power of Jesus' parable really is about God's people mixed into the dough of the world. Taking something relatively bland and uninteresting, a world where people are going about their business, and making it alive with resurrection life, Easter life. May you be filled with resurrection life yourself today. May you know the life of Jesus in you, raising you from the dead, calling you into new adventures, new opportunities. May you recognize that that life that he puts in you is also being spread out into the world like yeast in a dough. And may you bring something that's relatively uninteresting and boring, the world without Jesus, into something alive with his life through you. God bless you today.